Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where every day I explore how technology is transforming our life, our business, and indeed world. And whether we are at home or in the office, we are all completely reliant on our favourite apps and services, whether that be on our phones, tablets, laptops, or desktop PC in the office. And this was perfectly highlighted to me back in 2017 when I think it was Amazon's AWS servers suffered an outage and it took down half the internet. And for 4 very long hours, especially as a tech columnist and podcaster, Grammarly, Medium, Slack and Trello were all collaterally affected by the outage. So that afternoon, my productivity took a nosedive. But as an ex-IT guy, I know the importance of monitoring servers and applications and having a more proactive than reactive approach to performance monitoring. So today, I want to tackle the topic of SaaS performance monitoring and explore the challenges, opportunities, and much more. So I invited Mark Banfield from LogicMonitor onto the podcast. And today we're not just going to be talking about high availability and keeping the lights on, but also explore how performance monitoring is being used to help businesses' growth, and also the migration of workloads into the cloud. Intrigued? Curious? Whew, glad you said that. So Mark is a fellow Brit, but he's waiting to speak with us all the way in Austin, Texas. So let me beam your ears all the way over there now. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Morning, Neil. My name's Mark Banfield. I'm Chief Revenue Officer for LogicMonitor, which is a fast-growing SaaS-based company in the area of infrastructure monitoring. We're headquartered in Santa Barbara, but I'm based in Austin, Texas, which is where I'm calling you from today. And we have a growing international footprint with offices all over the world now.
Fantastic. And like you said, LogicMonitor is known as a SaaS-based performance monitoring platform for enterprise IT and service providers. But for people just hearing about you for the first time, can you tell me a little bit more about exactly what you do differently from all those other solutions out there? Because it's an incredibly crowded marketplace, isn't it?
Absolutely. Well, the area of monitoring is in somewhat of a renaissance. It's such an important area for so many organizations. If you consider every company in the world is going through digital transformation, they're digitizing every aspect of their customer journeys, and very much the customer experience that you encounter from any brand is really a digital experience, and therefore monitoring the underlying infrastructure of those digital experiences is incredibly important. And if you take the example of a bank, 15 years ago, you walk in a bank, you have a relationship with someone in a bank, you talk to someone in a bank, or you call your bank, and now, of course, everything is done online, everything's on a mobile app, and your experience is absolutely underpinned by how well they're able to deliver that digital experience. So we monitor all of the underlying infrastructure that underpins employee services, or whether it be customer applications and services that any organization can run. So we have customers in all kinds of sectors, all kinds of different verticals. And then, of course, we have service providers. We have managed service providers that use our product to provide a managed service for end user organizations. So a little bit about what's different about us is that the first thing is that we're SaaS. Most monitoring platforms are on-premise based, and they were really built at a time when most of the infrastructure that needed to be monitored was on-premise based. And I think the uniqueness about us is that we were founded 11 years ago, and the founder basically used to run data centers for Citrix Online. And one of the challenges he found was that as he embraced new technologies, new types of infrastructure, he was having to deploy new types of monitoring solutions, and very often they were always on premise. And he saw an opportunity to build a SaaS-based platform that would really monitor everything. And to this day, that remains a core value proposition for us. We monitor a vast array of different infrastructure types out the box. So we cover more than 2,000 different technologies that we can monitor out the box. And then because it's SaaS, it's very flexible and it's very extensible, which means it's very quick to deploy. We have an agentless architecture, which means it's very quick to deploy, very quick time to value. And organizations that use our platform can also extend the capability of the monitoring. So through their own scripting or through using a system integrator or through even from asking us to do it, they can extend to monitor new types of device types and new types of infrastructure types. And that's vitally important because one thing that's absolutely certain for every organization in the world is that the digital transformation journey is driving them to a cloud, and it's driving them to innovate quicker. And very often that means deploying in the cloud, AWS, Google Cloud, Microsoft Azure, and embracing new environments such as Kubernetes, Docker, things like that, containerized environments. So the infrastructure environments they're managing are changing rapidly, and therefore they need to keep up with a very innovative platform that allows them to continually embrace these new types of infrastructures and make sure they've got coverage. And the business case is very simple because, you know, as I said earlier, the digital experience is critical to these organizations, and downtime in an application is deadly for any kind of brand. Slowness in any kind of application is deadly. And therefore, having very strong monitoring to be able to identify issues quickly and solve issues quickly is critical. So hopefully that gives you a bit of an overview.
Absolutely. And I must admit, as an ex-IT guy, I still get flashbacks of critical business applications going down because the log files have filled a C drive or the certificates run out. And like you say, unavailability is just not acceptable anymore. So I'm curious, as someone that works right in the heart of this space, what are the most common mistakes that are made when you see IT performance monitoring?
Sure. I mean, we actually have a survey that we've done with a number of customers and prospective customers where we've looked at this and we've spoken to CIOs and IT owners and understood the most common challenges. And of course, we know from deploying our own platform where our customers tell us are the biggest challenges. And there's sort of 5 that I'll mention. The first is relying upon individuals and human-driven processes. That's a real problem for organizations because, as I told you there, like, you know, if you need to monitor a new environment, that may require some sort of manual process. That may require some sort of patch to the system, or it may require some sort of intervention manually. And that's just dangerous because, of course, the more you can automate, the more that you can trust the system will deal with these issues quicker. The second is considering an issue resolved when monitoring cannot detect recurrence, and that's a very common issue that we see with our customers. The third is an overload where, you know, the system's just throwing up too many alerts. There's no sort of AI approach to proactively minimizing the number of alerts. So therefore, the IT operator isn't really able to sort of make sense of that. And it's a lot of manual, intensive analysis to really understand the issues. The fourth is monitoring system sprawl. So as I mentioned earlier, we very often when LogicMonitor is deployed, we will replace upwards of 5 to 10 different monitoring systems that are in place already. And of course, and you can imagine how valuable that is because all of a sudden now you're looking at everything from a single pane of glass. And for a lot of organizations, that's a real challenge. If they're using multiple tools, that means multiple failure points. That means multiple times they will come out of one tool into another, look in different systems to identify the problem, which can be a real challenge. And the last thing is not monitoring your monitoring system. So as I said, like, you know, if you deploy a on-premise monitoring solution, you as the customer, you're entirely responsible for the delivery of that service. And of course, the big benefit of SaaS is that, you know, our customers don't have to worry about that. Like, we run a huge SaaS platform. It's incredibly sophisticated, and it has a huge amount of built-in resilience. So we can, you know, pretty much guarantee the service availability. And of course, that's a critical one as well, because, you know, if your monitoring system goes down, then you've got no way of monitoring the infrastructure that's supposed to be monitoring.
And the changing nature of today's work environment, combined with constantly evolving technology, is, of course, causing organizations to evaluate the best ways to monitor their IT infrastructure. And one of the things that I always remember, one of the big challenges I always saw was convincing project managers and project teams to think about monitoring before it even enters a live environment and having someone ready to capture that information before it goes live. So I'm curious, are you seeing attitudes and actions changing towards monitoring?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's unlikely there's a CIO on the planet that doesn't have monitoring as a pretty critical initiative in the current climate. And it goes back to what I talked about at the beginning. It goes back to, why is it so important? Well, it's so important because the entire world we live in is changing so dramatically because everything is becoming digital. And therefore, your brand is entirely dependent upon how well you deliver that digital experience. And monitoring that experience and monitoring the underlying infrastructure that delivers that digitization is critical. And I think that it's become a boardroom topic because if you think about, it's a catastrophe for an organization to have an outage. I mean, a major, shall we say, a major airline that's well known to many of us had an outage. Well, I think they've had 2 or 3 outages in the last year. Major disruption to their business, major issues in terms of customer experience, major frustrations for customers. Can't check in, can't book tickets, flight delays, flight cancellations. I mean, and it's catastrophic, and therefore the reason monitoring is becoming high profile is because it underpins the ability to avoid those major PR disasters happening. And the cost to a business is astronomical. I mean, you think about any kind of business, the airline example is a good one where the cost to their business for having an outage, an IT outage like that, is runs into many tens and tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars.
And for any business leaders listening that are all too aware of all the problems that we've highlighted in this conversation so far, do you have any examples of how a company can go all in with a SaaS-based monitoring system and maybe upgrade from their old legacy monitoring solution?
Yeah, we do. I mean, we have a number of different examples across all kinds. I'll talk. I won't necessarily give the customer names, but I'll give you some examples from different verticals. So we have education organizations is a good example. We have major colleges, major universities who use us to monitor, who have reduced down from using multiple monitoring tools down to using one, and are able to provide that single pane of glass, provide more consistency into how they're monitoring their core infrastructure. There's one good example. Another one would be in retail. We have a number of organizations in retail. One I can mention actually is Ted Baker as a public referenceable customer. And Ted Baker actually uses to monitor all of their core infrastructure. And Ted Baker is a UK brand. It's a fashion brand. They have many stores all over the world. Very much dependent upon the IT infrastructure that underpins their business. If you think about like the ability, the importance of monitoring everything they do from their website through to their point of sale systems in store. And Ted Baker's a good example of where they've used monitoring a little bit more innovatively to almost measure business performance. So they're not just monitoring whether things are going up or down and what the CPU usage is like. They're actually monitoring the performance of the business and how well the business is performing in different stores, how well they're doing in terms of shipping goods to customers and things like that. So there's a good example. And just one more perhaps worth giving is, we're strong in areas such as financial services and pharmaceuticals, healthcare. If you imagine a healthcare organization, we have major healthcare organizations that monitor the core infrastructure, but they go down right to monitoring devices that are in hospitals. And of course, that's critically important for many reasons. So, in terms of, really ensuring, delivering a great service to patients when it matters.
And I'm glad you mentioned performance a few moments ago, because I think it's so important that we highlight that it's not all about keeping lights on and high availability of applications. We need to think even bigger than that, because I don't think people think about how performance monitoring is actually being used now to help business growth and the migration of workloads into the cloud. Into the cloud. I could go on, but is that something that you can expand on?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the challenges for every organization is they're embracing cloud. And the big question for, I think, a lot of organizations is how do they shift to the cloud? And you effectively build your business in a cloud environment. But for most organizations, they're coming from a traditional on-premise environment where they've got vast amount of on-premise infrastructure and they're having to monitor different data centers. And of course, one of the things that's attractive about cloud environment is they can be more agile, they can move quicker, and they can potentially reduce costs by moving to a cloud environment. Being able to identify what's the performance of a workload in a particular environment, and then what might be the performance in a cloud environment, and being able to predict and forecast the usage in that environment and the cost in that environment is actually pretty important for organizations, and we absolutely enable them to do that.
And I'm curious, from those conversations that you're having with your customers, are there any trends of the kind of challenges that they're actually trying to overcome? And of course, how are you helping them overcome those challenges?
Yeah, I mean, the key trends, things I mentioned earlier, is really the biggest issue we find for organizations. And if you look at the RFPs we receive, most of the RFPs we receive talk about next generation infrastructure monitoring. It's organizations who have, deployed sophisticated monitoring, or perhaps it was sophisticated once upon a time. And what's driving the change now, and what's driving them to need to look at a next generation approach, is the move to the cloud and the move to these new environments. So we know from our customers, if we look at we're a SaaS platform, we can see everything that they're monitoring. We can see the growth in different infrastructure types that they're monitoring. And we know, for example, that Kubernetes is an environment that an infrastructure that type, if you like, that's growing very, very quickly. The monitoring of Kubernetes in the LogicMonitor SaaS platform is growing quicker than any other type of infrastructure type in our platform. So it's those new environments that's driving the change. That's really the trend we're seeing. If you look at what really matters to an organization is service availability. So the way that we are helping organizations achieve this is that we're able to group together different infrastructures that make up a overall service and deliver, we call it LM service insights. Effectively, what we're able to do is to monitor the overall health of the service and effectively take away the complexity of the underlying topology that underpins that particular service. And as you can imagine, a single service or application, imagine a back transfer application, could be underpinned by a vast amount of different types of infrastructure, ranging from the network through to the servers, through to the application environment, et cetera, et cetera. So being able to group together all of those disparate infrastructure types and being able to look at it from a holistic point of view is actually really important. That's the trend we're seeing, is something that customers really need, that ability to look at it from a service level.
And another trend that I'm hearing about more and more on this podcast, especially over the last few months, is AIOps. So when I discovered Simply announced an early warning system for AIOps, that's another reason I was excited to get you on today. So can you tell me a little bit more about that announcement too and what it means? Yeah, and it's an interesting, the term AIOps is perhaps used rather widely by a number of different people. Certainly our approach to it and what's driving our investment in this area and the innovation we're putting into this area is really about helping organizations become far more proactive. So one of the challenges, as I've talked today, and I talked about this sort of like vastly changing infrastructure world that our customers are embracing, and as I've talked about, like complexity, one of the challenges is, of course, is making sense of all that data and being able to make decisions quickly based upon all the monitoring data that you're getting back is becoming very difficult. And therefore, it's really a necessity to drive an AI approach. So for us, what that's about is creating this early warning system. And there's a couple of sort of key things to it. One is about finding the root cause quickly. So using techniques such as anomaly detection, using dynamic thresholds, using these kind of technologies, which takes an AI approach to, and the end aim is really about identifying the root cause quickly in order to drive a resolution more quickly and in order to help organizations to become
far more automated so that they can free up their people to focus on growing the business and being more innovative rather than having to dig through monitoring data to really identify what the issue is. So we're really, if you think about what matters to a CIO, what matters to a CIO is that you're obviously innovating, that you're on this digital transformation journey. But it becomes really difficult to do that if all you have to do is continually add more resources to deal with issues. So we're really trying to take the approach of being very preventative for organizations. We're trying to help them identify issues quicker, solve issues quicker, and keep their business running and allow them to focus on innovation.
And we're recording this conversation at the end of 2019. And I think it's important to highlight that LogicMonitor has rounded off this year with record growth and expanded your international footprint and globing your hiring push to boot. But I've got to ask, what are your plans for 2020 and an entirely new decade of opportunities too?
Sure. I mean, it has been a great year. I mean, we've if you only have to look on LinkedIn or look at our website to know that we've gone from circa 200 people a year ago to more than 500 now, and we'll continue growing at that pace because our revenue is growing at that pace. So, and we're sort of seeing it coming from a number of different areas. I mean, first off, we are really starting to win very well in the enterprise. As I mentioned, even today, I've mentioned a number of different types of organizations, different types of verticals. But we're starting to see that tick up significantly. We're starting to see more and more enterprises embracing this way of thinking around monitoring, this next generation of infrastructure monitoring. So that's the first thing. But we're seeing that also on an international footprint. So US is still our home market, it's our dominant market. But we're seeing rapid growth in EMEA and Asia Pacific. So we have a significant presence in London. A year ago, there was around 10 people in London. Now it's somewhere in the region of 60 people and growing at a lightning speed, really. And we're selling all over Europe today from our London office. And you'll see us move into opening regional offices in EMEA in the next 6 months. Likely Germany and Netherlands are sort of two sort of highlighted critical markets. We're also put increased presence on the Nordics, where we see a big opportunity, as well as Southern Europe, Middle East, etc. And then in Asia Pacific, we're seeing rapid growth there as well. I mean, a year ago, we had no presence in Sydney, Australia, and now we have an office there with more than 20 people, and it's a healthy part, a growing part of our business. We have great customers, great customer wins, great logos down there, and it's growing very quickly. We also have an office in Singapore, which has been the company. We've had the office for a number of years, and it's really been a technical center of excellence for us in terms of providing around the world support and serve customer success. But we're going to invest in driving our investment commercially into that region. So Singapore, I've been out there a couple of times in the last few months, is a really buoyant market, and it's growing incredibly quickly, and it's really to some extent the gateway to Asia, or certainly the gateway to Southeast Asia, and so it's a real opportunity for us to invest there. And then we're opportunistically looking at other markets in Asia Pacific and Europe, but they're the key major investments. And then the last part, two other things is, one is service providers. We've talked a little bit about today. So managed service providers make up about 40% of our revenue globally today, and it's one of the fastest growing parts of our business. And our platform is very applicable and very suitable for a managed service provider. We're a multi-tenanted environment. Being SaaS, we allow these organizations to deploy quickly, get quick time to value, which is incredibly important for those organizations. So we'll continue to invest in our managed services business. We have dedicated managed services sales team and account management team and customer success team. And we're really partnering with those MSPs to help them grow. And the last sort of major area of investment is around channel. So we just hired a VP of channel called Sanjay Gupta, who was previously running channel for BMC globally. He's now running global channel and alliances for LogicMonitor. That's an incredibly important part of our business. There's really two sides to the channel and alliances business. One is traditional sort of VAR reseller system integrator, where we've built a program and we have a motion in place where we're starting to really build some traction with those resellers, with those system integrators, with those consultancies that can take LogicMonitor's product to market in conjunction with us, and they can act as the front, if you like, for these organizations they're selling into. And that becomes really important as we grow globally. And the last area is then alliances. I mean, we have great integration points in our platform with the likes of ServiceNow, where you can integrate directly into the CMDB, which is incredibly important for driving health and hygiene in the CMDB because we discover so much in the network. We monitor and integrate with AWS, Google Cloud, Microsoft Azure. On AWS, for example, we are on the AWS marketplace. We're partnering with AWS to take LogicMonitor's platform to market. So there's some of the big investment areas, and you'll see a big growth from us in the next 12 months, I believe. I think it's one of the most exciting businesses in the monitoring space, and I think there's a massive opportunity for us to really bring our platform to a global audience, and to help organizations move to a next generation of infrastructure monitoring.
Wow, certainly seems like you're going to be incredibly busy next year, and we'll have to get you back on the podcast in 2020. But for anybody listening that'd like to find out more information and check out what you do, find you online, and even contact your teams if they've left with any questions after listening to our conversation, can you just point them in the right direction of the best way of doing that?
Absolutely. I mean, obviously, on our website, www.logicmonitor.com, you can, through there, find a number of different ways to get in contact with us via our sales teams, our success teams, in the various offices. As I mentioned some of the places that we've got offices all over the world. So, you can get in contact with us locally. I mean, if you want to email me, that's fine as well. My email address is mark.banfield@logicmonitor.com, and I will always do my best to respond to anyone. And as I said, if you're interested in talking to us, either from a perspective of how we might help you move to this next generation of infrastructure monitoring that's hybrid, that allows you to monitor these different environments, then please get in contact. Or even if you're interested in coming to work for us, because we're hiring incredibly quickly. And we have a huge number of open opportunities across every different department in the company: sales, marketing, customer success, support, technical services, etc., etc. So please do get in touch and come and talk to us.
I think for some time now, legacy on-premise monitoring systems have faced this uphill battle in terms of deployment, spend and scalability. But having listened to you there, by complete contrast, SaaS-based monitoring systems are enabling businesses to realize the benefits of flexible monitoring that actually leverages technology to not only keep up with the company in this fast-moving digital age, but also providing those crucial insights into dynamic infrastructures. So a big thank you for coming on and sharing those insights with me today.
Thanks very much, Neil. I really appreciate the time and appreciate the opportunity, and look forward to hopefully speaking again sometime.
I think everybody knows and understands now that they need monitoring to ensure site uptime and that high availability required to keep their business operating. And yet, many businesses still suffer from outages. So it was great to hear from Mark today about those 5 most common mistakes in IT performance monitoring, but also about thinking bigger when it comes to monitoring, and exploring how performance monitoring is actually a great way to help business growth and the migration of workloads into the cloud. But if we do have any techies out there or any business leaders that are having their own challenges with performance monitoring or even leveraging opportunities from getting it right, your challenges, your successes, your failures, I want you to email them to me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, or tweet me at Neil C. Hughes. We'll then share them on this show, and maybe we can all learn a thing or two from each other. That's how this podcast works, so I genuinely hope that you will send in those insights directly to me. And if you join me again tomorrow, we'll do it all again with a different guest, talking about a different technology and how it's transforming an industry, or indeed multiple industries. So all that's left for me to say is a big thank you for listening, and until next time, Don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.